On a dimly lit estate in East London, a group of young men in designer jackets eye every passing stranger with quiet menace. "You don't want to be hanging around here," one finally mutters to an outsider, a cold warning cutting through the silence. This is the Gascoigne estate in Barking, Albanian's territory. Outsiders are unwelcome, and after dark, the normal rules of London life don't seem to apply. Here, the street belongs to a new breed of gangland power. Albanian gangsters who have seized control of these blocks and beyond, enforcing their rule with a mix of seductive wealth and brute violence. Albanians is an Albanian street crew infamous in this part of London. By day, the estate looks like any other low-income housing project. By night, it's a fortress of the gang's making. Years ago, local residents began noticing flashy sports cars, Ferraris and Lamborghinis, rolling through the narrow streets. The gang's members, many just in their 20s, proudly flaunted wads of 50 notes and gold Rolexes. They didn't hide in the shadows, instead they preened on social media, posting slick music videos on YouTube and Instagram. In these clips, masked young men draped in gold chains rap in Albanian about loyalty and violence, showing off wheel-spinning Bentleys and scattering stacks of cash. In one video, a drone camera soars over the very tower blocks they govern before cutting to scenes of gang members surrounding a Metropolitan Police patrol car, a brazen display of contempt for authority. Before the police and tech companies shut it down, the Albanian's Instagram account had over 100,000 followers tuning in to see this outlaw lifestyle. The message was unmistakable. Albanians are ready for war, armed with AK-47s. The gang likes to brag about their Kalash, slang for Kalashnikov rifles, and backed by an army of soldiers on the streets. Locals have learned to keep their heads down. The Gascoigne estate wasn't always under Albanian control. Back in the mid-1990s, it was a different world. The estate was ruled by old-school British crime families. Outsiders, especially people of color, risked a beating if they wandered in. Later, a Jamaican gang led by a fearsome boss nicknamed the King, Delroy Lewis, ran a 24/7 open drug market on these blocks, slinging crack cocaine and heroin at all hours. That operation was ruthless and efficient until Lewis's luck ran out. He was taken down and jailed in 2004, leaving a power vacuum on the estate. By that time, the neighborhood's demographics were changing. An influx of refugees from Albania and Kosovo had arrived, fleeing war and chaos in the Balkans. Albanian soon became the second most spoken language around here. And with their community growing and the previous gang boss gone, a new generation of immigrant gangsters saw their opportunity. It wasn't long after Delroy's downfall that the Albanian flag was metaphorically planted on the Gascoigne. A crew of young Albanians gradually took over the local drug trade and underworld activities. They called themselves Albanians, a name that blended their heritage with a street-hardened identity, and they established a stranglehold on the estate. Rookwood House, a graffiti-covered high-rise block nearby, became their headquarters. Its design was perfect for a gang's purposes. Interlocking walkways and a limited number of entry points made it easy to secure against police raids or rival incursions. Lookouts could spot trouble coming from a distance. Inside those concrete corridors, Albanians members could organize their business, stash drugs and weapons, and retreat to safety after making a quick sale on the corner. For years, Rookwood House stood as a symbol of their dominance, even appearing as the backdrop in one of their music videos, until a city redevelopment plan finally saw the tower demolished. But even that didn't weaken Albanians. The gang simply shifted operations to a new base a short walk away, near a pub that locals quietly avoid once night falls. Every night around 9 p.m., witnesses say the same crew of faces gathers there, ready to conduct business. Albanians has become embedded in the fabric of this community, at times seeming like a part of the local culture, albeit a dark and dangerous part. The hallmark of Albanians and their peers is a mix of ostentation and intimidation. They recruit heavily from the Albanian youths in London, especially those who see few other opportunities or who are drawn by the promise of fast cars and easy money. The gang's flashy presence, the social media posts, the music boasting of their exploits, isn't just for ego. It's deliberate propaganda aimed at luring youngers fresh recruits who are impressed by the gangster glamour. In their videos and posts, Albanian's members refer to new recruits as falcons, a romanticized term for the foot soldiers eager to fly high on the proceeds of crime. It's a seductive trap. Teenagers are enticed with designer clothes, stacks of cash to fan their faces with, maybe a chance to hold a high-powered motorbike or pose with a pretty girl from the videos. They don't see the brutal reality that lies beneath, at least not until they're in too deep. The truth is that life in this gang is as disposable as the next kid in line. Anyone who betrays the group or fails to follow orders risks severe punishment, if not a beating or stabbing, then possibly a worse fate. And if rivals encroach on their turf, Albanians have made it clear they will respond with violence. Their lyrics and online posts openly threaten other gangs. They've even taunted a rival Albanian outfit known as OTR, short for on top of the rest, daring them to clash. It's all carefully curated to project an aura of invincibility on the streets of London. What many casual onlookers don't realize, however, is that Albanians is only the street-level face of a much larger beast. These young men embarking are effectively the foot soldiers and enforcers of what is sometimes called the Mafia Shqiptare, the Albanian Mafia, an organized crime network that extends far beyond this one estate. Over the past 2 decades, Albanian organized crime groups have systematically taken over key parts of Britain's underworld economy. They are not the only foreign criminals in London, of course, but their rise has been particularly spectacular. Once dismissed as newcomers, they are now considered one of the most powerful criminal fraternities operating in the UK. The National Crime Agency, Britain's equivalent of the FBI, has warned that Albanian gangs have consolidated power rapidly, to the point of nearing a monopoly over the UK's £5 billion a year cocaine trade. From the shipping ports of Europe to the housing projects of London, one criminal network with roots in the Western Balkans has muscled its way to the top of the drug supply chain. To understand how this happened, one has to look back at the history that forged these gangsters. Many of the key players came of age in the 1990s during tumultuous times in Albania and neighboring Kosovo. Those years were marked by economic collapse, lawlessness, and even civil conflict. Young men from that part of the world grew up amid chaos. Some fought in the Kosovo War or survived violent disorder at home, and they carried the hard lessons of that era with them. When Albania's communist regime fell and the country was plunged into poverty and instability, criminal enterprises flourished. A culture of survival at any cost took root. In that environment, codes of honor and clan loyalty remained strong but were applied to new endeavors: smuggling, black market deals, and organized crime. One concept Albanians prize is besa, meaning keeping a promise or trust. Among the gangsters, this translates into a reputation for reliability. If an Albanian crime boss strikes a deal, he will deliver on it. That earned them credit and partnerships in the underworld. At the same time, an older tradition called the kanun, an eye for an eye honor code that sanctions deadly revenge for betrayals, means these gangsters are also feared. Cross them and retribution can be fatal, not just for the offender, but potentially for their family back home. This mix of dependable loyalty to allies and merciless vengeance against enemies proved to be a potent formula in the criminal underworld. It allowed Albanian networks to form strong alliances and discouraged others from double-crossing them. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, as Albania's economy struggled, many ambitious young men looked westward for opportunity. Some emigrated legally or claimed asylum. Others were smuggled illegally into countries like Italy, Belgium, and the UK. London, with its booming economy and established crime networks, was an attractive destination. The Albanians arrived to find certain illicit markets already dominated by others. For instance, the sex trade in London had players from various nationalities. But the newcomers were cunning and highly organized. They started making their mark by focusing on the underbelly of the night economy: prostitution and vice. With frightening speed, Albanian gangs seized control of brothels across various UK cities, ousting or absorbing the competition. Through a combination of charm and brutality, they became the new pimps and madams behind closed doors. Countless Eastern European women Some from Albania itself, others from countries like Romania, Lithuania, or Slovakia, found themselves trafficked by these networks. Many were lured with false promises of legitimate work as waitresses or cleaners in England, only to have their passports seized and their bodies sold in backstreet flats and massage parlors. The Albanian crime groups proved especially ruthless in this arena. If a woman disobeyed, she could be beaten or raped into submission. Victims were passed like commodities from one gang member to another, sometimes sold for a price between pimps. Police operations in the 2000s uncovered terrifying cases. Women held captive, abused, and forced to have sex with dozens of men a day under threats of violence. In one notorious case, a 16-year-old girl was tricked into coming to London and endured over a year in sexual slavery, shuttled between brothels run by an Albanian-led gang. When that ring was finally busted, the judge described it as slavery, alive and well. The pattern was clear. Albanian gangs were willing to exploit the most vulnerable, impoverished young women in this instance to build their criminal enterprises. It was a sign of things to come, but it was the drug trade that truly elevated the power of Albanian gangs in London. By the early 2010s, they had shifted much of their focus from prostitution to narcotics, and in particular to cocaine. The timing was strategic. Demand for cocaine in the UK has always been high, from city bankers snorting lines in club bathrooms to street dealers pushing crack rocks on corner blocks. Traditionally, the cocaine business in Britain involved a chain of different groups. South American cartels would get the product to Europe, Dutch or Belgian wholesalers would distribute it, and various British gangs, from Liverpudlian crime families to West Indian yardies or local London crews, would handle retail on the streets. It was an old system with many middlemen and a lot of markups along the way. The Albanians saw an opportunity to upend that entire model, and they took it. Sometime around the late 2000s, enterprising Albanian kingpins did something unprecedented. They negotiated directly with the Colombian and Latin American cartels, producing the cocaine. Cutting out the long-time Dutch wholesalers, the Albanians arranged massive shipments of cocaine to be delivered straight from South America to Europe, often through ports they had connections in. Suddenly, they weren't just street dealers, they were importers. In doing so, they achieved two major advantages over every other dealer in Britain. First, they got the cocaine at rock-bottom prices. While other gangs might have been paying over $20,000 for a kilo of coke via middlemen, the Albanians could get that same kilo for perhaps $4,000 to $5,000 by going straight to the source. Second, they ensured the purity of their product remained high. No more heavily cut, weak cocaine, they were bringing in high-purity bricks, then distributing them with only minimal dilution. This meant that on the street, Albanian-supplied cocaine was both cheaper and stronger than what competitors were selling. For drug users and lower-level dealers, that combination was irresistibly profitable. It was a revolution in the UK underworld. Virtually overnight, Albanian networks undercut their rivals and won a huge share of the market. If you were a small-time dealer in London by the 2010s, chances are your supplier's supplier was Albanian. The Mafia Shqiptar had, in effect, become the new wholesale club for cocaine, and they did it while maintaining tight control. Albanian gangs don't just import the drugs and hand them off. They often control the whole supply chain from port to point of sale. It's a vertically integrated business model. One crew oversees the smuggling from, say, Latin America to a port in Belgium or Spain. Another branch handles trucking it clandestinely into the UK, perhaps hidden in shipments of produce or building materials. Yet another faction deals with breaking it down and distributing to regional managers, and street-level teams like Albanians push it to customers and enforce territory. By owning each step, they maximize profit and minimize dependence on outsiders. The extent of their operation occasionally flashes into public view when a big police bust goes down. In early 2021, for example, an astonishing discovery was made at Portsmouth Port. Border Force officers inspected what looked like a regular shipment of bananas from Colombia, but hidden among the pallets of fruit were dense packages of cocaine, 2.7 tons of it in total, with a potential street value north of 200 million. It was one of the largest cocaine seizures in UK history. Investigators soon learned that an Albanian-led crime group was behind this shipment. The gang had even acquired a legitimate fruit import company in London, using it as a front to bring in drug-laden cargoes. They planned to distribute the coke all across London and beyond, dividing it up by batches marked with unique stamps corresponding to different customer gangs. When armed NCA officers raided a warehouse in Tottenham to intercept the delivery, they found members of the smuggling crew frantically tearing through banana boxes, desperately searching for the missing cocaine they thought had slipped past customs. The gang had prepared dozens of empty cardboard boxes to conceal the drugs for further transport, and even had a stash of suitcases ready, likely to be filled with cash profits. Hidden in the rafters of the warehouse, the police found a firearm and ammunition, evidence that this was a highly organized and dangerous outfit. Among those arrested were multiple Albanian nationals, alongside a couple of associates from other countries. A reminder that while the Albanian Mafia often works within its own ethnicity, it's not averse to partnering with anyone who can facilitate the business. Stories like that banana shipment bust highlight both the ambition and the international reach of these gangs. The tentacles of the Albanian Mafia extend from the coca fields of South America to the docks of Antwerp and Dover, and from the council estates of London to high-end European casinos where profits might be laundered. They move with a blend of old-school gangsterism and modern high-tech savvy. On one hand, they rely on trusted familial bonds and face-to-face meetings, cementing deals with a handshake and their word, Besa. On the other, they embrace encryption technology to coordinate crime. A recent law enforcement operation revealed just how deeply embedded Albanian traffickers were in the clandestine communications networks used by organized crime. In 2020, European police hacked into an encrypted phone system called EncroChat, which was a secret text messaging network favored by drug lords and gun runners across the continent. The results were explosive. Millions of hidden messages were suddenly visible to authorities, and a slew of raids followed. In the UK, Operation Venetic targeted dozens of major criminals identified through EncroChat, and many of them were Albanians. One was a 33-year-old man named Bujar Kosminka, living inconspicuously on a busy high street in Wembley, northwest London. Kosminka was no street dealer. He was a logistics man for an Albanian organized crime group, coordinating multi-million-pound drug deals from behind an innocuous front door. When armed officers finally arrested Kosminka in May 2021, they found nearly £300,000 in cash hidden across two of his properties. Ledgers discovered on-site detailed an illicit business moving at least 100 kilograms of cocaine, worth around $8 million on the street, and laundering roughly $2.5 million in dirty money. Kosminka had been operating under a pseudonymous handle, Insatiable Beta, as he brokered deals via encrypted texts, confident that the police could never read his messages. He arranged narcotics shipments around the country and moved hundreds of thousands of pounds weekly, all while London was under the quiet of COVID lockdowns. Unbeknownst to him, investigators were watching his every text in real time once EncroChat was cracked. When the case finally came to court, the evidence was overwhelming. Faced with transcripts of his own boasts and orders, Kosminka pleaded guilty. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in prison in 2024. A hefty sentence, but perhaps a small price in the context of the empire he was helping to run. Astonishingly, this wasn't Kosminka's first run-in with British law. He had been caught nearly a decade earlier for similar crimes, convicted in 2012 for conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. After that conviction, he was deported to Albania, only to quietly slip back into the UK under a false identity or hidden amongst the waves of illegal entrants to resume business. That determination to defy law enforcement and the ease with which he returned underscore the challenge authorities face. For every Kosminka taken off the streets, there may be another to fill his role, sometimes even the same individual returning for a second round. The higher echelons of the Albanian Mafia remain notoriously hard to reach. While foot soldiers like Albanians flash their bling and occasionally get busted in spectacular police operations, the true kingpins often maintain a much lower profile. Some are believed to operate from abroad, coordinating shipments and finances from safe havens in continental Europe or even back in Albania, where they can live in fortified luxury with their ill-gotten wealth. They use layers of intermediaries and counter-surveillance techniques to stay a step ahead of the cops. And due to that code of silence and loyalty, flipping an Albanian gang member to become an informant is exceedingly rare. These guys know that betrayal could bring lethal consequences, not just for themselves, but for their relatives back home. It's been noted that the old generation of Albanian crime lords actually frowned upon the flashy antics of Albanians, precisely because it threatened to draw attention to their far larger, more profitable operations. These older bosses would rather the business of drug trafficking and money laundering carry on quietly, embedded in the city's fabric, without Instagram or YouTube alerting the world to their presence. Still, even the most discreet criminal enterprise has real repercussions, and in the case of Albanian gangs in London, the impact on communities has been profound. They have effectively controlled the streets in certain districts, not in an overt political sense, but through fear and influence. Neighborhoods like the one around Gascoigne Estate have residents who feel that an invisible hand determines what happens after dark. Which corners are safe, who can sell drugs where, and who gets punished for stepping out of line. The gangs also siphon wealth out of these communities. Money from local addicts, or from young people drawn into dealing, flows upward into the criminal coffers and often overseas. And there's another dark side. These networks exploit vulnerable communities at every step of their operation, both in the UK and back in their homeland. Consider the pipeline that brings an Albanian gang member from a village in the Balkans to a street corner in London. It often starts with a lie. In remote towns of Albania, where jobs are scarce and hope even scarcer, whispers spread of opportunities in England. Sometimes it's a local fixer, maybe someone who himself spent time in Britain, who tells impressionable young men that they can make a fortune across the channel. In recent years, this recruitment has gone digital. On TikTok and other social media, flashy videos targeted at Albanian youth have glorified the journey to the UK. One clip that circulated showed a small boat speeding across a choppy sea toward the white cliffs of Dover, emblazoned with the caption, "Fuck school, let's take the boat to England." It's a brazen marketing ploy by the smugglers. Ditch your humble life, come get rich in the land of opportunity. What they don't advertise is the price of the trip, often thousands of pounds, and the strings attached. By 2022, an unprecedented number of Albanians were appearing on England's southern shores in flimsy inflatable boats, part of the wider migrant crisis. Many were immediately claiming asylum, citing persecution or danger back home. While some of those claims were genuine, Albania has issues like blood feud violence, domestic abuse, and anti-LGBT persecution that can make life dangerous for certain individuals. A portion of these arrivals were effectively foot soldiers in waiting for the gangs. British officials noticed a pattern. Organised criminal groups had embedded themselves in the migrant routes. Albanian gangs were operating around the migrant camps in northern France, offering passage to the UK for those who couldn't afford it, in exchange for a future debt. Young men who agreed to these terms often didn't realize exactly what awaited them. They might have thought they'd work construction or some job to pay off what they owed the smugglers. The reality was often more grim. Once in Britain, cut off from family and hiding from authorities, these men found the smugglers transformed into their handlers. They were told they had debts running into tens of thousands of pounds, far more than the original cost of the journey, padded with brutal interest. To repay it, they had two choices: either toil in the underground economy for slave wages or directly involve themselves in the gang's criminal enterprises. The journey through Europe was harrowing, packed in lorries, hiding in safe houses, and finally a dangerous nighttime boat ride across the channel. There are many young Albanian men invisible in plain sight across the UK, washing cars, working on construction sites for cash, guarding cannabis grows in suburban houses, effectively indentured to the criminal networks that brought them in. They blend in because they're mostly white and speak a bit of English. People assume they're just another migrant worker from Eastern Europe, maybe Polish or Romanian. But in reality, they are victims of trafficking, every bit as much under the thumb of their employers as a woman in a brothel or a child in a sweatshop. The Albanian gangs exploit these men viciously, knowing they won't go to the police. They're too scared and often ineligible to stay legally. One charity worker in London remarked that the levels of violence and intimidation used by these traffickers are shocking. She said it's hard to comprehend how brutally the young men are treated, because people normally associate trafficking with women and sexual exploitation, not with adult males doing manual labor. Yet here it is. Modern slavery, hidden behind the facade of normal odd jobs. Then there are the women. Decades after first muscling into the sex trade, Albanian crime groups are still deeply involved in pimping and human trafficking for sexual exploitation. A woman named Zana, not her real name, tells a familiar story. She was approached in Tirana with an offer to work as a nanny in London. Desperate to improve her life, she agreed and was slipped into Britain with a fake passport. The moment she arrived, the nightmare began. Her handlers took her documents and beat her. She was told she'd be working off a huge debt. Zana ended up in a massage parlor in Soho, forced to serve up to 12 men a day, never seeing a penny of the money. Whenever she resisted, her pimp, an Albanian man who had himself once been an exploited teen in the drug trade before earning a promotion to running girls, burned her with cigarettes. It took months before police, acting on a tip, raided the place and freed her. By then, the damage, physical and psychological, was done. Zana was just one of many. In cities across Europe, Albanian-run prostitution rings have been busted, where women from all over Eastern Europe, including Albania's own rural areas, were kept in inhumane conditions. It's another way these gangs prey on the hopes of the vulnerable. Every person who dreams of a better life can be a tool for them. Whether that's a young man who thinks he can strike it rich selling drugs, or a young woman who thinks she's getting a legitimate job abroad. The common denominator is the exploitation of desperation. Even within the UK, Albanian gangsters find ways to exploit local vulnerabilities. They've been known to recruit British teens as well, especially runaways or kids from troubled homes, to work as street dealers or drug couriers. The rise of the Albanian cocaine importers actually made things hotter on the streets for a lot of British gangs. Suddenly, cocaine was everywhere, cheaper and purer than ever, and smaller UK gangs saw they could make quick profits selling it in their neighbourhoods or through so-called county lines. The practice of urban gangs sending young dealers to rural towns to flood those areas with drugs. Gun violence and knife crime ticked up in various cities as turf wars flared over this lucrative trade. In one particularly tragic incident in 2019, a 14-year-old boy named Jaden was murdered in a gang-related attack in East London, an area where, officials noted, the competition over the coke business had become fierce after prices dropped. While Jaden's death wasn't directly tied to Albanians, the police suspected that the volatility in the local drug scene, spurred by the influx of high-grade cocaine from the Albanian pipelines, created an environment where younger and younger kids were getting sucked into deadly feuds. It's a ripple effect of the Albanians' stranglehold on the drug supply. By making coke widely available and relatively cheap, they inadvertently empowered countless smaller criminal outfits to get into the trade, many of whom employed youths as runners. Those youths became both perpetrators and victims of new rounds of violence. Essentially, the criminal monopoly has trickled down mayhem into some of Britain's most deprived communities. Law enforcement in London and throughout the UK is painfully aware of the problem. The National Crime Agency has a dedicated unit working on Albanian organised crime, and police forces have upped collaboration with European partners. There have been successes, like the banana shipment interception, like the EncroChat takedowns, like numerous raids on cannabis farms and brothels that saved trafficked victims from hellish conditions. The NCA and Metropolitan Police have even run joint operations, storming cafes and social clubs in London suspected of being hubs for people smuggling gangs. In one recent series of dawn raids, officers targeted an Albanian-run network that was advertising illegal channel crossings on social media. They arrested several suspects in London, 3 Albanian men and a woman from Eastern Europe, who were allegedly offering to smuggle migrants in trucks and small boats, then facilitating their exploitation once in the UK. A senior official described these groups as vile gangs who exploit vulnerable people to make money, vowing to dismantle them piece by piece. The British government has also tried to respond on a policy level, signing agreements with France to bolster beach patrols and with Albania to streamline deportations of criminals. New laws promise tougher sentences for traffickers and gang leaders. But for all these efforts, the Albanian mafia's grip is not easily broken. Part of the difficulty is sheer economics. As long as there is a fortune to be made from drugs and illegal migration, these gangs will keep finding recruits and new strategies to evade law enforcement. And the pipeline is self-replenishing. Many Albanians who come to the UK are not criminals. They are ordinary people seeking a better life. Yet the blanket stigma that has formed, fueled by sensationalist media coverage and even inflammatory political rhetoric calling the arrivals an invasion, often pushes these newcomers into the margins, where they can become easy prey for the criminal networks. Distrusted by society and desperate for income, some fall right into the waiting arms of the gangs who speak their language and offer under-the-table opportunities. Inside prisons, the influence is notable too. Albanians have become one of the largest foreign nationality groups in UK jails, disproportionately represented considering the relatively small size of the Albanian community in Britain. Drug convictions and trafficking cases have filled cell blocks with Albanian-speaking inmates. Some continue to run aspects of their operations from behind bars using smuggled phones. After all, their connections outside remain intact, and many have loyal subordinates ready to follow orders even if the boss is locked up. Meanwhile, on the outside, there's always someone eager to climb the ranks. Every time a crime boss is extradited or a local gang leader gets put away, a competitor or a lieutenant steps up to keep the business going. The profits are simply too large, and the ties of blood and clan too strong for the enterprise to wither easily. For Londoners living under this shadow economy, daily life goes on, but with a keen awareness of what lurks in the background. A pub owner in an area with a lot of Albanian immigrants might notice a table of quiet, muscle-bound young men who come in at odd hours, paying in cash, speaking only among themselves in Albanian, and wonder if they're part of them. A mother on the Gascoigne estate might know which blocks to steer her teenage son away from, fearing he'll be seduced or bullied by the gang hanging out there. A user looking to score cocaine in the city these days might simply call a number and have an efficient delivery made, Uber style, never realizing how many layers of gang hierarchy and exploitation were involved in getting that powder into his pocket. Late at night, in certain parts of London, you might catch a glimpse of a slick BMW with blacked-out windows idling at a street corner. Maybe you'll see a quick handoff, cash for a small packet, and the car speeds away. The streets fall quiet again, but you know that transaction is just one of hundreds happening that night, part of a vast invisible web spun by Albanian gangs. In a different neighborhood, the back room of a cafe hums with low conversation in Albanian. An older man, a community elder perhaps, pleads with some younger men to stay out of trouble, but they have already been running minor errands for the local gang, and the lure of easy money is strong. Across town, a police team executes a raid on a nondescript house. Inside, they find row upon row of cannabis plants and two half-starved Vietnamese teenagers who were locked in to tend this illegal farm, victims of another branch of this sprawling criminal enterprise. And somewhere in an Albanian village, another family says goodbye to a son or daughter heading for London, praying they'll be safe, not knowing if they're destined for honest work or to fall into the clutches of those who would exploit them. This is the underworld ecosystem that has developed, one that feeds on poverty, fear, and greed, stretching from the Balkans to Britain. The Albanian gangs in London have mastered the art of controlling the streets, not by openly claiming turf like in an old Mafia movie, but through subtler means. They control through the supply of drugs, through the debts that tie people to them, through the fear they instill by the occasional act of outrageous violence as an example to all. Their power is equal parts bullet and myth, the gun that will be used if necessary, and the legend of ruthless efficiency that often means they don't even need to pull the trigger. For the vulnerable, this is a nightmare hidden in plain sight. For the gangs, it's a lucrative business model. And for the authorities and communities fighting back, it's like battling the many-headed hydra of Greek lore. Cut off one head, and two more emerge. Yet there are glimmers of hope. Each rescued trafficking victim, each major drug seizure, each conviction of a gang leader hits at their empire bit by bit. Community organizations are working to give young Albanians alternatives to the gang path and to support those who have been victimized so they aren't driven back into the hands of their abusers. Still, the struggle is far from over. As midnight approaches in London, business is just beginning for some. In the shadows of a council estate, an Albanian dealer counts a roll of cash from tonight's sales, while a few floors above, a user lies in a stupor from the product he's just bought. In a cramped bedsit across the city, a trafficked man rests aching limbs after another day of labor, wondering if he'll ever truly be free. And in the corner of a noisy pub, two gang associates whisper about the next big shipment coming in. This is the legacy that Albanian gangs have wrought on London's streets, a mix of predation and opportunism, of promises and pain. It's a world ordinarily unseen by law-abiding citizens, but its effects ripple through society in crime statistics, in hospitals treating stab wounds and overdoses, and in the silent suffering of those exploited behind closed doors. The story of how Albanian gangs came to control these streets and exploit the vulnerable is ultimately a story of power taken and abused. It's about a rise from immigrant underdogs to underworld kingpins. It's the tale of young men hardened by war and poverty, banding together in foreign lands and carving out an empire in the only way they knew, through crime. It's about communities failed by social systems, both in Albania and in Britain, becoming breeding grounds for exploitation. And it's about the symbiosis of predator and prey, gangsters who thrive on desperation and desperate people who fall under the gangsters' thrall. As dawn approaches, the city begins to stir and the gangsters of the night retreat to their bolt holes. London carries on, largely oblivious to the parallel world that exists in its midst. But the shadows remain. In those shadows, Albanian crime lords and their foot soldiers continue to run their ruthless enterprises, shaping the lives of countless people, from the addicts on the corner to the teens on the estate to the families an entire continent away. It's an immersive, unsettling reality, one where the streets of London, for all their bustle and brightness, are also hunting grounds for a criminal network that rose from distant mountains to rule by fear and fraud. This is how they control the streets, and this is how they exploit the vulnerable, in a cycle that authorities and communities are desperately working to break, even as the Albanian Mafia's story in London continues to unfold in a deadly ongoing saga. A quiet Athens taverna on a January night. Families dine under warm light. Suddenly the door bursts open. Masked gunmen rush in. Terrified patrons dive under tables as a volley of suppressed gunshots shatters the calm. At a corner table, two men collapse to the floor, blood pooling near scattered plates of food. Their wives and young children watch in horror, screaming as the assassins slip away into the night. It looked like a brazen Gangland execution, because it was. What no bystander could know is that this hit was just one flashpoint in a secret war stretching from the Balkans to the heart of Western Europe. Who ordered the murders? And how did a feud born in a small Montenegrin town ripple into a global cocaine pipeline? Those answers would shock even veteran investigators. But that night in Athens, one thing was certain: this was far from over. But what no one realized then was who was really pulling the strings. Our story begins over a decade ago in Kotor, a postcard-perfect town on Montenegro's Adriatic coast. Narrow medieval streets and old stone churches hardly seem like the cradle of an international crime empire. Yet around 2010, as older crime bosses fell from power, Kotor's underworld seized a golden opportunity. A notorious Serbian-Montenegrin drug lord, Darko Šarić, had just been taken down. His 2009 arrest, Operation Balkan Warrior, saw over 2 tons of cocaine seized in Uruguay. Šarić's downfall left a vacuum in the Europe-South America drug pipeline. A group of ambitious young smugglers from Kotor stepped in to fill it. They called themselves the Kotor Clan, and they quickly forged direct partnerships with Latin American cartels, smuggling cocaine from Colombia and Peru into Europe. By the early 2010s, this Montenegrine network was flooding the Balkans and beyond with South American cocaine, quietly becoming key brokers in Europe's drug supply. But with success came greed, and greed ignited internal tensions. In 2014, a shipment of 200 kilograms of cocaine went missing during a deal in Valencia, Spain. Within the Kotor crew, fingers pointed and tempers flared. A chunk of cocaine that size was worth millions, and someone had tried to hide it. What happened next would split the underworld. The once unified Kotor gang fractured into two bitterly opposed factions, the Shkaljari clan and the Kavac clan, named after rival neighborhoods of Kotor. On one side stood Jovan Vukotic and Igor Dedovic leading the Shkaljari. On the other, Slobodan Kaštelan and Radoje Zvicer, heads of the Kavac clan. The Montenegrin cocaine monopoly had cleaved in two, and a vicious feud was born. The war between the Shkaljari and Kavac clans erupted swiftly and violently. The first casualty came in early 2015, when a Shkaljari associate was gunned down in Belgrade. It was only the beginning. Tit-for-tat assassinations followed as each clan hunted the other's members across Montenegro, Serbia, and beyond. By the mid-2010s, bodies were dropping in the streets, and at least 50 people had been killed in this feud. Some victims were rival gangsters, but others were family members, friends, even innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire. Drive-by shootings, car bombs, and daytime cafe assassinations became grimly routine. In April 2019, Jovan Vukotic's own father was shot dead outside their home in Kotor, a clear message that no one tied to these clans was off-limits. What made this conflict especially perilous was its reach into society's upper echelons. The rival clans had immense wealth from cocaine trafficking, and with it, they bought alliances. Other Balkan criminal groups pledged fealty to one side or the other. Even some corrupt police officers and politicians allegedly took sides, offering protection to their favored clan. A secret civil war was raging in the Western Balkans underworld, and its shockwaves would soon be felt across Europe. Yet, even as they warred with each other, business was booming. Both clans continued shipping cocaine in record volumes. The real money was made not on the streets of Montenegro, but in supplying Europe's lucrative drug markets. So while hitmen hunted rivals, the Montenegrin brokers kept the cocaine pipeline flowing to feed Europe's €5.7 billion a year habit. It was only a matter of time before this deadly struggle and the cocaine trade behind it drew intense scrutiny from international law enforcement. The stage was set for a showdown. By the late 2010s, the Kotor clans had evolved from regional gangs into a global trafficking enterprise. The Western Balkan traffickers, Montenegrins, Serbs, and their allies became masters of logistics, moving cocaine across oceans and borders with astonishing efficiency. Unlike old-school Italian or Colombian mafias, these Balkan networks weren't highly centralized cartels. They operated in flexible cells, using trusted contacts in port cities and Balkan diaspora communities worldwide to coordinate shipments. Their specialty was infiltrating the maritime shipping industry. After all, over 90% of global trade moves by sea, and Montenegro's seafaring heritage gave them a secret weapon. One infamous example, the MSC Guyane. In June 2019, US authorities in Philadelphia discovered almost 20 tons of cocaine hidden on this container ship, one of the largest cocaine seizures in American history. The scheme was audacious. As the ship crossed the Atlantic, crew members, including several Montenegrin sailors, had used ropes and nets to haul duffel bags full of cocaine from speedboats directly into the vessel's cargo holds at night. They then resealed the containers with fake seals to escape detection. It was an inside job on the high seas, pulled off by crewmen recruited by Balkan traffickers. 8 crew members, 5 Montenegrins, 1 Serb among them, were later convicted for that massive smuggling operation. The chief logistician behind the Guyane shipment, prosecutors say it was a Montenegrin ex-boxer turned drug trafficker who is now in custody awaiting trial in New York. And that was just one shipment. Across South America and West Africa, a web of Montenegrin operatives orchestrated countless loads of cocaine bound for Europe. Traffickers from these clans lived for years in places like Brazil, forging partnerships with Colombian and Peruvian suppliers. They dispatched fishing boats laden with cocaine from Venezuela, Suriname, and Brazil, sailing toward West Africa or Europe with tons of product hidden on board. Western African ports and islands became waypoints where drugs were stashed or transferred to yachts and sailing vessels headed north. In one case, authorities believe the Kavač clan was coordinating a fleet of fishing boats, moving 1.2 tons of cocaine every 2 weeks from South America to West Africa, an almost industrial-scale supply line. From there, much of the cocaine flowed into Europe's biggest ports: Rotterdam, Antwerp, Hamburg, hidden among legitimate cargo. By the time it reached the streets of Paris, London, or Berlin, its origins were virtually untraceable. When we talk about large-scale shipments to supply the European continent, the only group that's hegemonic is the Balkans, said one Brazilian federal police detective, astonished at the reach of these traffickers. Yet even as the Balkan mobsters solidified their role as Europe's cocaine shipping giants, they were spending just as much effort trying to annihilate each other. The Montenegrin clan war raged in parallel with the cocaine boom, a secret war that spilled blood from the Adriatic to the Aegean. The clans showed a chilling determination to wipe out their rivals, no matter where in the world they hid. They hired professional hitmen, some former soldiers, even foreign mercenaries, to carry out high-profile assassinations of enemy bosses. For less prominent targets, they recruited local thugs and hungry young gangsters willing to kill for a quick payout. This mix of highly trained killers and amateur gunmen ensured a steady tempo of violence. Some hits were sophisticated and surgical, others brazen and messy, endangering innocents. We already witnessed one such attack in the opening scene, the Athens restaurant ambush of January 2020. One of the victims, Igor Dedovic, was a top Shkaljari leader. The other, Stevan Stamatovic, was another senior clan member. They had believed themselves relatively safe that evening, dining with their wives and children in a foreign city. But the Kavač hit squad had no qualms about executing them in front of their families. The hit was meticulously planned and swift. It stunned Greek authorities and sent a clear signal to the Shkaljari. Nowhere is safe, but it wouldn't be the last time their paths crossed in Greece. Just 6 months later, in July 2020, two Shkaljari-affiliated men, Alan Kojar and Damir Hadjic, were found riddled with bullets outside a rented villa on the island of Corfu. They too had been hiding abroad, only to be hunted down. Investigators later found that the Corfu double murder was arranged via encrypted phone messages by Kavač members and carried out by assassins on Zvaisa's orders. The Balkan cocaine war had truly gone international. The Kavač clan was not immune from retaliation. In May 2020, it was Radoje Zvica, the Kavač boss, who nearly met his end in a foreign land. While Zvica was jogging near his apartment in Kiev, Ukraine, a hit team sent by his enemies opened fire, striking him multiple times in the chest. Zvica collapsed on the pavement as the gunmen fled. It seemed the Kavač leader's luck had run out, but incredibly, he survived. According to some reports, Zvica's wife, who was armed, returned fire at the attackers, forcing them to retreat. A dramatic twist fit for a thriller. Wounded but alive, Zvica cheated death and soon recovered. The foiled Kiev assassination only hardened his resolve. If anything, the violence escalated further. Clan bosses on both sides now believed only the death of their counterpart would end the war. By 2021, dozens of operatives, friends, and relatives from both factions had been slain in Montenegro, Serbia, Greece, Spain, Ukraine, Germany, and beyond. No tactic was too extreme. Car bombs blew up rivals' vehicles in the middle of cities. Assassins impersonated police officers to get close to targets. In one instance, hitmen even attempted to poison an imprisoned clan leader by tainting his food. An effort thwarted at the last moment when police arrested the imposters carrying vials of cyanide. Each mini-conflict ended with one more funeral, one side rejoicing and the other plotting revenge. The war reached a crescendo in 2022 with a string of high-profile hits. The Shkaljari clan, already decimated, lost its figurehead. In September 2022, Jovan Vukotic, the very man who had once led the Shkaljari faction, was assassinated in Istanbul, Turkey. Vukotic was driving through the city with his wife and young daughter when a gunman on a motorcycle sped up alongside his car and opened fire, killing him instantly. The murder bore all the hallmarks of a professional contract killing. After years on the run, hiding under false identities, Vukotic had finally been caught. With his death, the Shkaljari clan was effectively beheaded. Both of its original bosses, Dedovic and Vukotic, were now dead. Kavač loyalists quietly celebrated they had eliminated their arch-rival's leadership. In their eyes, the war was won. But the story was not over. Even as one chapter of this bloody saga closed, another was about to unfold, one that would expose the full extent of the clan's power and their vulnerabilities. The Kotor clan's reign of terror and profit was about to face its biggest threat yet. A combined onslaught from international law enforcement. For years, the Kavač and Shkaljari clans operated like ghosts, visible only in the trail of violence and drugs they left behind. Police on multiple continents were chasing shadows, struggling to piece together the structure of these groups. But by 2020, their luck began to run out. A series of law enforcement breakthroughs started to turn the tide against the Balkan cocaine bosses. One game changer was the infiltration of encrypted phone networks used by organized crime. In mid-2020, European agencies hacked into EncroChat, an encrypted messaging service, and later a similar platform called Sky ECC, both heavily used by drug traffickers. Suddenly, investigators were reading criminals' secret conversations in real time. For the first time, police could peer inside the command and control of the Kotor clans. What they found was startling. The chats revealed not only drug deals, but details of planned hits, corrupt officials on payroll, and fugitives' hideouts in the encrypted group chats of Kavač clan members. Montenegrin investigators saw cold-blooded efficiency and occasionally chilling glee. One example stood out: an officer named Petar Lazovic. To the public, Lazovic was a young agent in Montenegro's anti-drug directorate, sworn to take down traffickers. But encrypted messages exposed him as a mole on the inside, an active law officer secretly doing the bidding of the Kavač clan. Lazovic had been feeding information to mobsters and sabotaging investigations. In January 2020, just after the Athens double murder of Shkaljari bosses, Lazovic boasted in chat about the kill count. He joked with a fellow corrupt officer that if a few more Shkaljari rivals were eliminated, it would be 6-0, essentially keeping score of murders like a football game. He even offered to pass messages to the committee, their codename for Radoje Zvica, head of the Kavač clan, saying he was at Zvica's disposal if the boss's family needed anything after the Athens hit. These revelations were jaw-dropping, a sworn policeman cheering on Mafia killings and calling a drug lord boss. It illustrated just how deep the corruption ran. But now, finally, the facade was cracking. In July 2022, Montenegro moved decisively. Acting on the trove of evidence supplied by Europol, authorities arrested Petar Lazovic at his home. He was charged with membership in a criminal organization and abuse of office, accused of subordinating the police service to the Kavač clan's interests. His arrest sent shockwaves through Montenegrin law enforcement, and he was just the first domino to fall. Within months, Montenegro's new special state prosecutor reopened old cases that had been mysteriously shelved. Investigators went after Lazovic's superiors and allies. By the end of 2022, a former high-ranking special prosecutor was arrested for allegedly protecting Kavač members. In April 2024, Lazovic's own father, Zoran Lazovic, a prominent ex-police official, was arrested on charges of helping cover for the clan. The message was clear: the impunity was over. The hidden infrastructure of influence that Kavač enjoyed was being ripped out, root and stem. Meanwhile, beyond Montenegro, police forces across Europe were coordinating to hit the clan's operational cells and finances. In neighboring Serbia, a dramatic crackdown unfolded against Kavač's key allies. In February 2021, Serbian authorities arrested Veliko Belivuc, a notorious gang leader in Belgrade who acted as Zvica's sergeant-at-arms. Belivuc and his band, known for extraordinary brutality, had allegedly carried out murders on behalf of the Kavač clan, including dismembering victims and disposing of bodies in an industrial meat grinder to leave no trace. When police raided Belivuc's secret hideout, they indeed found a heavy-duty meat grinder covered in biological traces, confirming the horrifying rumors. Photos of grisly crime scenes and torture devices seized from Belivuc's safe house made headlines. The so-called Belivuc group was neutralized, and with it, the Kavač clan lost its deadliest hit squad in Serbia. Across Europe, more dominoes fell. In 2022, Spanish and Serbian police collaborated to intercept a sailing yacht near the Canary Islands, packed with 2.7 tons of cocaine destined for Europe. The alleged kingpin behind the shipment was Slobodan Kostovski, a 70-year-old Serbian trafficking veteran who had been living in Brazil for years. Nicknamed the General, Kostovski had built extensive ties to South American cartels and oversaw huge transatlantic shipments. His arrest in August 2023 was a major coup, proof that even senior Balkan traffickers who thought themselves untouchable could be tracked down and brought to justice. That same year, 2022, Europol announced the takedown of a sprawling super cartel that was supplying about 1/3 of all cocaine in Europe. Among those arrested was Edin Gacanin, a Bosnian Dutch drug boss who led the so-called Tito and Dino cartel. Gacanin was a key partner connecting Latin American producers with European distributors, including networks in the Western Balkans. He was apprehended in the UAE, and other arrests followed in France, Spain, Belgium, and the Netherlands. This super cartel bust demonstrated the massive scale and connectivity of modern drug networks. The Montenegrin clans did not operate in isolation, but as part of a broader alliance of kingpins spanning Europe and the Middle East. Multinational investigations also homed in on the financial flows of the Balkan bosses. Authorities traced laundered money through luxury real estate in Spain and Dubai, shell companies, and cryptocurrency accounts. They found clan leaders living large off drug profits, mansions on the Turkish Riviera, $2 million apartments in Dubai, private yachts and fancy cars, even as they ordered killings back home. Governments began freezing these assets and sharing intelligence to squeeze the traffickers' wallets, not just their triggermen. And crucially, the Western Balkan countries themselves ramped up cooperation with Western agencies. In one high-stakes operation in February 2020, Montenegrin police worked with the UK's National Crime Agency and partners to track a cargo ship named Aresa in the Caribbean. Acting on Montenegrin and Serbian intelligence, Colombian and Dutch forces intercepted the Aresa off Aruba. On board, they hit the jackpot, 5 tons of cocaine bound for Europe, hidden in a bulk carrier sailing from Venezuela to Greece. The entire Montenegrin crew of 7 was arrested, and the 189 million worth of cocaine was seized. The operation was hailed as a model of international teamwork. It also pulled back the curtain on Montenegro's outsized role in global smuggling. British officials openly acknowledged that Balkan crime groups have become dominant suppliers of cocaine, posing a major threat before the drugs ever reach UK shores. By late 2023, the once invincible Kotor clans were on the defensive. Hundreds of arrests had been made across Europe. Dozens of operatives and associates were behind bars. Guns, cash, and cocaine were seized in record quantities. Crucially, informants began to emerge. Lower-level members, seeing the writing on the wall, who decided to cooperate with authorities. Courtrooms in Serbia, Montenegro, Greece, and Spain started to hear testimony about how the clans operated, who killed whom, and who gave the orders. The code of silence was cracking. Yet despite these successes, one phantom still loomed large over the Balkan cocaine trade, the mastermind who had yet to be caught. Law enforcement had flipped the script on the clans, but a final chapter remained unwritten. One of the key puppeteers was still at large. Through all the arrests and upheaval of recent years, one man managed to slip away. Radoje Zvita, the notorious co-founder and leader of the Kavač clan. As police closed in, Zvita vanished like smoke. He is now Europe's most wanted Balkan drug lord, featured on international wanted lists and believed to be hiding under false identities. From 2020 onward, multiple arrest warrants were issued for Zvita in Montenegro, Serbia, and even Austria. But each time agents got close, he was gone. In one instance, just hours before a planned raid on a safe house, Zvita disappeared, tipped off by corrupt insiders or a lucky change of routine. It's a cat-and-mouse game worthy of a Hollywood thriller, and so far the cat hasn't caught the mouse. For Zvita, survival has meant constant movement. Intelligence sources suggest he's changed countries frequently, from Balkan hideouts to the Middle East and Latin America. There are unconfirmed sightings, a guarded villa in rural Panama, a luxury apartment in Moscow, whispers of plastic surgery to alter his appearance. All the while, investigators believe he continues to coordinate cocaine shipments and manage what's left of the covert network from the shadows. It's a testament to the infrastructure these clans built. Even decapitated, they maintain momentum like a headless snake still coiling. As of April 2025, Zvicer remains a fugitive, likely protected by a mix of loyal henchmen and whatever alliances or bribes he can muster. However, his world has shrunk. The empire he once ran with impunity is now largely dismantled. His longtime partner, Slobodan Kashelan, was arrested and faces trial in Montenegro. Dozens of his best hitmen and smugglers are imprisoned or dead. His assets are seized or frozen. Most crucially, his protectors in police and politics have been exposed and taken down. The safety net that allowed Zvicer to evade the law for so long has frayed badly. It's only a matter of time before the noose tightens. As one detective put it recently, he can run, but he's running out of places to hide. The fall of the Kotor clans has sent shockwaves through organized crime circles. For nearly a decade, these Montenegrin and Serbian brokers sat at the apex of Europe's cocaine trade, brokering deals between South American cartels and European distributors with ruthless efficiency. They proved that a crew from a tiny Balkan country could become kingpins on a global stage, outsmarting and out-earning more famous mafia groups. They showed a willingness to employ unlimited violence to protect their business, devastating their own communities in the process. At least 50 people lost their lives in the Kotor clan feud, and many more were tortured, maimed, or terrified into silence. The conflict even drew in Serbia's feared Zeman clan, Belgrade football hooligan gangs, and corrupted officials, creating a dark web of alliances that rewrote the Balkan criminal landscape. Now, with one clan wiped out and the other on its last legs, Balkan authorities and their European partners have a brief moment to breathe. They have stunted the cocaine pipeline that ran through Montenegro's port of Bar and Serbia's Danube crossings. They have disrupted the flow through Spain's ports and foiled gangland plots from Athens to Antwerp. For the first time in years, Montenegrin citizens have seen powerful mafia figures and their backers hauled into court in handcuffs, a sign that justice, albeit delayed, is possible. In a region where many doubted whether the untouchables would ever be touched, this is no small victory. And yet, a larger question looms. Has anything really changed? Europe's appetite for cocaine is as high as ever. In fact, higher than ever, with record seizures each year and new routes opening up. The demand that fueled the rise of the Kotor clans is still there, and so are countless other criminals eager to take their place. The Western Balkans remain a fertile ground for organized crime due to lingering corruption and strategic geography. As the Kavaч-Skaljari war dies down, new groups are already moving in to grab the market share. Law enforcement sources warn that Albanian mafia networks, for instance, are extending their reach, and remnants of the old clans may reform into smaller cells rather than disappear. The globalized drug trade is a hydra, cut off one head, and another emerges. Still, something has changed. The myth of invincibility around the Balkan cocaine brokers has been shattered. Their story is now widely known, told in courtrooms, detailed in media exposés, and studied by police agencies worldwide. The Western Balkans' organized crime spectrum is no longer under the radar, it's in the spotlight. Even the British government has acknowledged the threat, funding programs to counter Western Balkan crime groups before their drugs and violence can reach the UK. In the end, the saga of the Kotor clans is a cautionary tale of power and hubris. Two childhood friends turned enemies from a picturesque coastal town managed to flood Europe with cocaine, enrich themselves beyond imagination, and unleash a wave of carnage, only to eventually see it all collapse under its own weight, and the weight of concerted policing. It took an international effort to bring them down, from Europol task forces and American DEA agents to local Balkan detectives who refused to be bought. Many pieces of the puzzle had to fall into place, including the betrayal by one clan's insiders and the sheer brutality that made authorities realize they had to act. As our story closes, picture once more that idyllic Kotor Bay at dusk. the sun setting over tranquil waters that hide untold secrets on the seafloor. The town is quieter now, the murders have subsided, but the shadow of the cocaine trade still lingers over the Adriatic. Radoje Zvica, the last of the old Kotor kingpins, is out there somewhere, looking over his shoulder. Will he be the next to fall? Or will he manage to reinvent himself and his business yet again in a world that's grown wise to his tricks? One thing is certain, as long as there's money to be made, the underworld will keep adapting. The Western Balkans' role in the cocaine trade was once a hidden story. Now it's an open book. The final chapter for the Kotor clans is being written in real time, with each arrest and each seizure. The war may be over, but the fight against the pipeline they built is not. Europe's drug habit ensures that new criminals will step up to pull the strings. The real question now is, can authorities stay one step ahead in this deadly game, or will another Balkan ghost network rise to take the crown? Before sunrise, a phalanx of Spanish National Police storms a Madrid apartment block. Boots thunder up concrete stairs. A door crashes open. Inside, startled young men freeze as red laser sights dance across their chests. In minutes, 11 suspects are in cuffs. It's the takedown of a gang with an oddly disarming name, Dominicans Don't Play. A name that belies a trail of blood and fear. They certainly weren't playing on the cold night that led to this raid. But what chain of violence brought an American-born gang to reign over Spain's streets? And what secret was nearly lost in the chaos? The answers begin in a turf war that turned a city into a battleground, and end with a twist that nobody saw coming. But first, flash back to where it all began. How did we get here? New York City, early 1990s, Washington Heights. A crew of Dominican-American teens form a street gang and dub it Dominicans Don't Play. It's a bold, almost cocky moniker. By the late 90s and 2000s, as waves of Latin American migrants arrived in Spain, the gang's influence jumped across the Atlantic. Madrid's working-class barrios soon saw the graffiti tags and colors of DDP alongside other bandas latinas. In fact, the group's founders had splintered off from older gangs like the Latin Kings and Yetas over national pride. Dominicans wanted their own brotherhood. They brought with them a fierce code and a taste for ferocity that Madrid had rarely seen. Police noted DDP's presence by 2006, already the largest Latin gang in Spain, and those numbers exploded in the years that followed as recruitment took hold in immigrant neighborhoods. These recruits sported baggy streetwear and colorful rosary beads, flashing complex hand signs in alleyways. They pledged loyalty to a new familiar on foreign soil, one that promised identity and protection, but demanded total obedience in return. Almost immediately, the gang's brutal reputation grew. Dominicans Don't Play became infamous for their weapon of choice. The machete, a blade nearly as tall as a teenage boy, terrifyingly easy to buy at any hardware market. Youths prowled city parks with these knives strapped inside pant legs, and after each gang clash, police would recover piles of sharpened steel slick with blood. As one officer later testified, DDP quickly proved the most dangerous gang in recent times, arming young members with illegal weapons used to injure, rob, and carry out sexual attacks. In public, they formed prayer circle poses for group photos, fingers contorted into gang signs around their red and black bandanas. In private, they enforced a savage discipline. Whispers spread of recruits beaten unconscious for minor disloyalty, even female members allegedly punished with gang rape for trying to leave. This wasn't just teenage posturing, it was organized terror. By the mid-2000s, 5 murders in Madrid had already been blamed on Latin gang violence. Dominicans Don't Play, with their "Don't Mess With Us" ethos, were at the forefront of the new wave of street carnage. The warning signs were flashing, and Spanish authorities knew it. But the storm was only beginning, and soon it would overflow. In November 2009, a major police sweep tried to decapitate the DDP beast. Officers rounded up 40 members in one strike. The haul spoke volumes: 5 firearms, a grenade, machetes, bats, stacks of cash, and cocaine. The gang's local capitulos, or chapters, had clearly evolved from ragtag crews into tightly armed units dabbling in drug trafficking and more. Yet even massive crackdowns did not stop the violence. By 2014, Dominican don't play's notoriety led to an unprecedented legal blow. Spain's Supreme Court formally outlawed the gang nationwide. DDP joined the likes of Blood and Honor neo-Nazis on the list of banned criminal organizations. Police described DDP as the most dangerous street gang in Spain, whose members rarely went out unarmed. The court noted the gang had surfaced around 2004 and formed its own identity after splitting from other Latin gangs. For Spain's law enforcement, it was a clear message: zero tolerance. And yet, a court order could not erase what was already woven into the fabric of certain barrios. Beneath the ban, DDP simply slipped further underground, like a virus going dormant, only to erupt more violently. The streets would soon bleed again. Nightfall, Madrid, years later, two rival gangs spot each other near a 24-hour McDonald's by Atocha station. It's the first weekend of February, a chilly Saturday of 2022. Within moments, insults fly and 8 youths rush a 15-year-old boy outside the neon-lit restaurant. In the blur of fists and blades, one attacker drives a knife deep into the teenager's chest, piercing his heart. The boy, Spanish-born but of Latin roots, collapses on the sidewalk as crowds scatter in panic. Across town 1 hour earlier, another vicious ambush had played out in a dark park in Usera, a southern district. There, a 25-year-old man lay dying from multiple machete blows to his back. In one horrific night, 2 young lives were snuffed out in separate gang clashes barely 60 minutes apart. Madrid's emergency services radio buzzed with confusion. Was this coordinated warfare? Fue una noche de machetes, sangre y llanto, one report grimly noted. It was a night of machetes, blood and tears. In addition to the 2 fatalities, at least 3 more people were gravely wounded in related brawls before dawn. The attackers melted away into the urban night, but everyone knew what they represented. The signature weapons, the brutality, the fact these brawls erupted nearly simultaneously, all of it pointed to the ongoing feud between the Dominicans don't play and their equally ferocious rivals, the Trinitarios. The city hadn't seen a night of gang violence this lethal in years. And it wouldn't be the last. The DDP Trinitarios rivalry had become a cycle of vengeance, spinning faster and bloodier. Dominicans don't play and Trinitarios were once allies back in New York, but in Spain they evolved into mortal enemies, each determined to rule the Latin underground. By 2022, police openly labeled them the 2 most active gangs in Madrid. Territorial skirmishes erupted over a glance, a crossed path, a claim to a street corner. Reyertas, spontaneous street fights, could explode anywhere from subway stations to shopping malls if rival members crossed paths. Often there was no deeper motive than recognizing the other as one of them. In one incident that September, rival gangsters collided by chance at a shopping center, sparking a rolling brawl through the food court. Such encounters were practically seek and destroy missions. In gang slang, they call it la caída, the hunt. A crew goes out hunting for enemies to ambush. That was exactly what happened to 25-year-old Diego, one of the victims of the February 2022 bloodbath. The investigation later revealed that a pack of DDP members had roamed Usera that night, de cacería, on the prowl, when they recognized Diego as a Trinitario. Like a pack of wolves, at least 10 attackers swarmed him, knives flashing. Diego never stood a chance. Scenes like this left entire neighborhoods in fear. In the aftermath, makeshift shrines of candles and graffiti memorials appeared on street corners, RIP tags in looping letters for the fallen. Each murder only fueled the thirst for payback, and payback came again and again. Spring 2022, a few months after that deadly weekend, revenge was in the air. In the suburb of Villaverde, broad daylight, an 18-year-old DDP member named Alejandro walks near some railroad tracks. He doesn't know it, but Trinitarios have marked him. They ambush him at lunch hour, a crew of teens armed with blades and fury. Witnesses later recount how the assailants, boys as young as 14, stabbed and beat Alejandro repeatedly, leaving him lifeless in the dirt. Investigators suspected this was retaliation for the 15-year-old killed at Atocha, the Trinitario's fallen brother. The cycle was complete. Blood for blood. 7 minors from the Trinitarios were arrested, some caught still wearing green bandanas and hiding machetes under their beds. A senior police official expressed alarm, not only for the brazenness of the murder, an execution at high noon next to a busy supermarket, but at the youth of those involved. Many hadn't even turned 18, yet were already scarred by violence and hardened by gang life. It was clear by now, Madrid was in the grip of a youth gang war, a tit-for-tat conflict with no end in sight. Police formed special task forces and flooded trouble hotspots with patrols, checking IDs of teens out late, confiscating weapons tucked in waistbands. Hundreds of arrests were made under a new anti-gang initiative. But for all the sweeps and seizures, the heart of the beast, the inner circle of gang leaders and their most devoted soldiers, remained at large, orchestrating chaos. The question loomed, what would it take to truly break the cycle? By late 2024, authorities got a partial answer, in the form of an all-out vendetta in Carabanchel, one of Madrid's southern districts. There, the Dominicans don't play, ran a chapter known as the Four Coros, infamous for its aggression. This crew had been hit hard by rival attacks, 3 violent incursions by Trinitarios in their territory, according to later intelligence. The third strike came on a September night. Around 11 p.m., residents of Carabanchel's Carpetana area heard what sounded like firecrackers, then screams. In the street, 4 young men lay bleeding from gunshot wounds and another with a machete slash, all around 20 years old. They were DDP affiliates, victims of a surprise drive-by hit by Trinitarios. 2 attackers were caught fleeing in a rideshare vehicle, one just 17, another 22, both Honduran and allegedly Trinitario foot soldiers. Miraculously, none of the 5 victims died that night, but it was a close call. The Four Coros chapter of DDP was humiliated and enraged, 5 of their own shot up on their home turf. A chilling sense of inevitability hung in the air, everyone braced for the retaliation that was sure to come. But that wasn't the end of it. Retaliation came on January 14, 2025, and it came in the dark. Nearly 11:30 p.m., a black van creeps through the Usera district. Inside are members of DDP's Four Coros crew, armed and out for blood. They're cruising a neighborhood known as Trinitario territory, looking for any rival to target. Up ahead, a lone 20-year-old man walks along Tomeloso Street, maybe coming home from work. The van's headlights bathe him in light. It screeches to a halt. 4, 5, 6 figures jump out and surround the young man. He freezes. These strangers are barking orders. In a bizarre twist, they force him to kneel and flash a Trinitarios gang hand sign, a cruel humiliation meant to insult their enemies. The victim, shaking and completely confused, complies. He's not in either gang, but he's at their mercy. Suddenly, bang, a gunshot at point-blank range. The young man crumples, a bullet lodged in his spine. Before he can even breathe, the attackers hack at him with a machete, slashing his head and arms repeatedly. The assailants then vanish into the winter night, leaving their innocent prey sprawled on the cold pavement. Neighbors who hear the commotion rush out to find a horror. The 20-year-old writhing, blood pooling, his spine irreparably damaged. Paramedics stabilize him, barely, and race to hospital. Against the odds, he survives, but he will never walk again. It was a brutal case of mistaken identity. The young man had no gang affiliation at all. He was attacked simply for being in enemy territory. This senseless act proved even to hardened detectives how wildly out of control the feud had become. Yet ironically, it was also the mistake that would finally help bring down the Four Coros cell. The police now had what they needed, a high-profile crime with enough clues to launch an extensive probe. The hunt for the perpetrators began that very night. For months, an elite police task force pursued the case. Surveillance units tailed suspected DDP members through the maze-like streets of Carabanchel. Wiretaps picked up anxious calls between gang lieutenants. Piece by piece, investigators mapped out the Four Coros hierarchy and the role each member played in the January ambush. In secret dawn raids, they quietly picked up lower-level players, flipping a few into informants. By summer 2025, the trap was ready. In the early hours of July 8th and 9th, Madrid police simultaneously raided 9 locations linked to DDP. They seized an arsenal of gang hardware, machetes and knives, imitation firearms that looked real, including a MAC-10 submachine gun replica and a revolver, plus ammunition, phones, laptops, and stacks of DDP manifestos and symbols. Parked outside one safe house, they even found the very getaway van used in the January attack. When the dust settled, 11 members of Dominicans Don't Play's 4 Coros faction were under arrest, 10 in Madrid and 1 who had fled to Leon. Among them were the suspected triggerman and machete wielder from the Usera shooting. At a press conference that week, Spain's Interior Ministry hailed the operation as a major victory. The 4 Coros crew, one of the most active and violent cells of DDP, was considered dismantled. Officials noted that this crew alone had been behind a string of violent crimes, and their takedown likely prevented imminent murders. For the first time in a long time, residents of Carabanchel could sleep a little easier, knowing the chief architects of chaos in their neighborhood were in custody. The arrests were a turning point. After 2 decades of mayhem, Spanish authorities had struck a serious blow against Dominicans Don't Play on their soil. 11 accused gangsters, all between their late teens and late 20s, now faced charges ranging from attempted murder to illegal weapons possession and criminal association. Judges wasted no time. 10 of the 11 were ordered held without bail, pending trial. As police led the cuffed young men out, cameras captured a telling image. Some suspects flashed defiant hand gestures, those DDP gang signs, even as they were shoved into patrol cars. It was a silent oath that the gang code lived on despite the crackdown. But behind the bravado, there was a sense that an era might be waning. The government vowed to keep remaining members under close watch. Community leaders, exhausted by the violence, organized neighborhood meetings to reclaim the streets for youth who had not yet been lost. And yet, even in triumph, there is tragedy. This story carries a final twist, one that reminds us how deep the scars of gang warfare run, and how the pain often radiates beyond the gangs themselves. Rewind briefly to July 2021, a summer night in Madrid's Retiro district. An 18-year-old emerging rapper, Isaac Lopez, known by the stage name Little Kinky, strolls through a dim pedestrian tunnel on his way to meet a friend and film a music video. Isaac is not a Trinitario. He's not DDP either, though they've tried to recruit him. In fact, he has repeatedly refused to join the Dominicans Don't Play over the past several months. Isaac has his music, his family, and despite mild autism, Asperger's syndrome that made him a bit of a loner, he's got dreams outside the gang life. But to the local DDP crew, Isaac's refusals are an insult, and worse, they've convinced themselves wrongly that he's sided with the Trinitarios. So on that July night, 4 DDP affiliates, 1 adult and 3 minors, stalk Isaac into the tunnel on electric scooters. It's eerily quiet. Isaac is on the phone with a friend, unaware he's being hunted. Suddenly, the attackers pounce. They stab him once, twice, 4 times in the back. The blade punctures his lung and heart. Mortally wounded, Isaac collapses beside the curb, his phone still connected, as the perpetrators flee into the darkness on their scooters. He dies there, alone under the concrete archway. The killing of Little Kinky sends shockwaves through Madrid. This wasn't a rival gang member. This was a vulnerable teenager, a beloved only son with a disability, murdered for nothing. A police manhunt swiftly followed. By November 2021, detectives pieced together the clues and arrested the 4 suspects. In their report, they laid out the motive boldly. Isaac was targeted for his continual refusal to join DDP and because the gang mistakenly believed he was a Trinitario. The truth was almost too cruel to believe. Dominicans Don't Play had killed someone not because he was their enemy, but because he said no to becoming one of them. 2 years later, in October 2023, the verdict came. The adult ringleader, 20-year-old David B., was found guilty of Isaac's murder, stabbed a defenseless 18-year-old in the back, and sentenced to Spain's most severe punishment, prisión permanente revisable, a form of life imprisonment subject to review. It was only the second time a gang-related killer had received that ultimate sentence in Spain. The judge cited not only the cold-blooded nature of the crime, but Isaac's particular vulnerability, his autism, in handing down the ruling. As David stood in court to hear his fate, he reportedly tried to offer excuses, claiming through tears that drugs clouded his mind that night and that he'd ruined two families, Isaac's and his own. But the damage was done. In the courtroom benches, Isaac's mother clutched a photo of her son and wept. The open question hung heavy in the air. Why? Why did this vibrant young man have to die? What twisted code of honor drove a gang to prey on one of its own community's children? There were no good answers, only the cold comfort that justice at last was served. The tragedy of little Kinky's murder casts a long shadow over the tale of Dominicans don't play in Spain. It reveals the painful truth that beyond the headlines of gang versus gang, the real toll is measured in innocent lives, shattered families, potential unrealized. It's the neighborhood kid paralyzed by a stray bullet. It's the grieving mother lighting a candle at a sidewalk memorial. It's the latent fear that once turned Madrid's parks into no-go zones after dusk. Yet, amid the heartache, there is a sliver of hope. Police and community efforts have weakened DDP's grip. Many of its most violent members are now behind bars. Spain's Supreme Court long ago branded the gang a criminal organization and ordered its dissolution, a directive being enforced piece by piece. Youth outreach programs are trying to intercept at-risk teens before the gangs do, offering art, sports, a different family to belong to. Still, the embers of gang culture don't die easily. DDP chapters persist in the shadows, and other gangs wait in the wings. The legacy of Dominicans don't play leaves Spain with lessons written in blood. About immigration and integration, about young people falling through society's cracks, and about the primal appeal of brotherhood, however toxic, to those who feel powerless. The final scene closes on a Madrid street at twilight. The camera pans from a fading DDP tag scrawled on a wall to the silhouette of youths playing football in a courtyard, laughter echoing. Was this the end of Dominicans Don't Play's reign of terror? Or just the closing of one violent chapter and the uncertain start of another? The answer, like the city's night, remains poised between hope and dread. A story still unfolding, even as the sirens fade. In the heart of London's Wealth District, where diamonds glitter behind bulletproof glass and watches cost more than homes, two men stepped out of a blue BMW on a warm August afternoon in 2009. They looked like money, tailored suits, slick haircuts, calm eyes. Nothing about them suggested what was about to happen. At 4:40 p.m., they entered Graf Diamonds on New Bond Street. It was a weekday. The store was busy. Staff smiled, expecting wealthy clients. But seconds later, one of the men pulled a handgun. The other shouted orders. Everyone hit the floor. They didn't waste a single movement. They pointed to specific cases, naming pieces they wanted. They had done their homework. They weren't smashing indiscriminately. They were working from a list. Within moments, display cases were emptied of 43 pieces of jewelry, rings, necklaces, earrings, worth nearly £40 million. In less than 3 minutes, they were gone. They walked out calmly, stepped into their BMW and disappeared into London's chaos. Minutes later, that car was found abandoned. They had switched vehicles, changed routes, and vanished without a trace. Police arrived within minutes, but the robbers had planned every detail. They had even used professional-grade latex prosthetics, full facial disguises crafted by a film industry specialist. When Scotland Yard recovered fragments of the masks, forensic experts were stunned at their realism. It wasn't a local job. It wasn't amateurs. Detectives soon realized this robbery matched a pattern seen across Europe and Asia. Clean, fast, and surgical. It was the signature of a network Interpol had been tracking for years. A group known as the Pink Panthers. The name came from a 2003 London heist when a Serbian gang hid a stolen diamond inside a jar of face cream, mimicking a scene from the Pink Panther. Since then, the name has come to represent one of the most prolific and elusive crime syndicates in modern history. Interpol estimates the Pink Panthers are responsible for over $500 million in high-end robberies across the globe: Monaco, Geneva, Tokyo, Dubai, Paris. Some lasted barely a minute. In Dubai, they drove through a shopping mall in broad daylight, smashed through a jewelry storefront, grabbed millions in stones, and fled before anyone could react. In Tokyo, they entered a boutique with polite smiles, then within seconds took $30 million in diamonds. They weren't reckless, they were precise. Many were veterans of the Yugoslav wars. They'd lived through artillery barrages, covert operations, and black markets. To them, a luxury store robbery was a controlled environment, clean, predictable, winnable. The Panthers weren't an organization in the traditional sense. There was no single boss, no written code. They operated as loose cells, bound by trust, kinship, and shared history. Members came from Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia, and Croatia. Many had served together in war or smuggling units. When peace came, they didn't disband, they adapted. After the collapse of Yugoslavia, the region descended into chaos. Borders shifted, governments changed, and institutions fell apart. Sanctions and blockades created massive underground economies. Soldiers, smugglers, and profiteers moved goods through secret routes: fuel, cigarettes, weapons. It was an economy built on corruption and survival. When the wars ended, that expertise didn't vanish. It globalized. The same men who once smuggled weapons into Bosnia were now smuggling luxury watches into Switzerland. The same shipping routes used for embargo breaking were repurposed for drugs and diamonds. And from those smuggling routes grew an empire, one that would go far beyond jewel theft. In the early 2000s, global cocaine production was booming. South American cartels were producing record quantities, but the old distribution routes through the Caribbean and Spain were under pressure from US and European law enforcement. The cartels needed new entry points, and the Balkans offered a perfect solution. Why the Balkans? Geography and corruption. The Adriatic coastlines of Montenegro and Albania are filled with hidden coves and shipping ports within easy reach of Italy. The region sits between east and west, a natural bridge for smuggling routes stretching from Turkey to Western Europe. And crucially, Balkan groups were already experienced logisticians. They knew how to move contraband quietly, manage transport fleets, and bribe customs officials. By 2010, Serbian, Montenegrin, and Albanian syndicates were forming direct alliances with South American cartels. They cut out the middlemen, buying cocaine directly from producers in Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. They began moving it through massive container ships bound for Europe. At first, most shipments came through Spain and Italy, but soon traffickers began favoring Belgium's port of Antwerp and the Netherlands' port of Rotterdam, two of the busiest cargo hubs in the world. Both handle millions of containers each year. Customs can only inspect a fraction of them. Balkan traffickers embedded operatives in those ports: dock workers, crane operators, customs officers, anyone who could tip them off about inspections or help extract the right container before it was checked. By the mid-2010s, Europol reports began referring to the Balkan pipeline, a vast trafficking network stretching from Latin America to Western Europe. From ports like Santos in Brazil, ships carried cocaine hidden inside fruit shipments, coffee beans, or industrial equipment. Once the containers arrived in Europe, they were routed to warehouses controlled by Balkan crews in Belgium, Germany, and the Netherlands. From there, the cocaine was divided and distributed across the continent, to Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, and crucially, the United Kingdom. Though separated by the English Channel, Britain remains one of Europe's most profitable cocaine markets. Annual sales are estimated to exceed $4 billion, with purity levels among the highest in Europe. The National Crime Agency has repeatedly described cocaine as Britain's most lucrative illicit commodity. And behind much of that supply, authorities say, are networks linked directly to the Western Balkans. While the Pink Panthers represented the flashy, cinematic side of Balkan crime, another branch was building an empire in silence: the Albanian cocaine networks. By the late 2010s, Albanian groups had emerged as dominant players in the UK's drug trade. They operated differently from traditional British gangs. They didn't seek headlines, they sought efficiency. They controlled wholesale import, distribution, and street-level supply through small, tightly managed cells. The Albanians understood scale. Instead of fighting for turf in street wars, they focused on logistics, ensuring a constant, high-quality supply at lower prices. Their strategy worked. By 2022, British police estimated that Albanian organizations controlled much of the country's cocaine wholesale market, working hand-in-hand with importers on the European mainland. These groups, often referred to by the NCA as the Mafia Shqiptare, maintain deep connections with both Italian and Balkan networks. Many shipments entering the UK originate from the same ports used by Serbian or Montenegrin traffickers, funneled through contacts in Antwerp or Rotterdam, and then smuggled into Britain by truck or ferry. One major bust in February 2024 exposed just how industrialized this trade has become. At the port of Southampton, customs officers discovered 5.7 tons of cocaine concealed in a banana shipment from South America, the largest drug seizure in British history. Investigators found that the shipment had been routed through multiple European ports before reaching the UK, mirroring the pathways of Balkan-run logistics lines. That single seizure had an estimated street value of nearly £450 million. The success of these groups lies in their structure: decentralized, secretive, and flexible. They avoid unnecessary violence, focusing instead on maintaining supply and reputation. They invest profits into legitimate enterprises: construction, hospitality, real estate, and import-export firms. In cities like London, Birmingham, and Manchester, authorities have traced property purchases, nightclubs, and even used car dealerships back to individuals linked to Balkan syndicates. Law enforcement agencies across Europe have struggled to keep pace. The networks adapt faster than the bureaucracies that pursue them. But there have been breakthroughs. One of Serbia's most powerful traffickers, Darko Šarić, was captured after years on the run. His organization had smuggled tons of cocaine from South America into Europe, laundering hundreds of millions of euros through offshore companies. His arrest was a turning point, proof that no figure, however protected, was untouchable. Then in 2019, Operation Familia, a massive Europol-coordinated investigation, dismantled a Balkan-run air route smuggling cocaine from Brazil to Europe. The operation spanned multiple continents, leading to 16 arrests in Europe, Latin America, and Asia, and the seizure of over a ton of cocaine at a Swiss airfield. In 2024, Spain's Guardia Civil struck again, uncovering one of the largest Balkan-run cartels operating on European soil. Over 8 tons of cocaine were seized, 40 people were arrested, and €50 million in assets, including yachts, luxury cars, and villas, were frozen. The group had links to West Africa and Dubai, using them as intermediate hubs for maritime shipments. And in 2025, Albanian police, backed by Europol, raided several properties in Tirana and Durrës, arresting 10 suspects tied to a cocaine ring moving shipments from Latin America through Hamburg and Rotterdam. Officials said the gang's leader had made over $40 million from a single consignment. Each year, the pattern repeats: new seizures, new arrests, new routes. But the structure remains intact. Britain's role in this story is more significant than it appears. Although the UK is not a major transit point for cocaine entering Europe, it is one of the continent's largest consumers. That demand fuels the entire system. The cocaine found in British cities often begins its journey thousands of miles away, in Colombia's jungles or Brazil's ports, before being handed off to Balkan logistics crews, stored in continental warehouses, and finally sold to UK distributors. British authorities estimate that nearly every major cocaine shipment entering the UK has some connection to organised networks operating out of the Western Balkans or their European partners. The National Crime Agency has identified the infiltration of UK supply chains by Balkan and Albanian groups as one of the most significant organised crime threats facing the country today. Their report in 2023 warned that these organisations have established enduring partnerships with producers and distributors and are deeply embedded in UK criminal infrastructure. These are not the chaotic street gangs of the past. They are multinational enterprises, mirroring legitimate corporations in scale and sophistication. They recruit professionals, accountants, IT experts, logistics coordinators. They use encrypted phones, cryptocurrency, and shell companies to move and clean their money. And while the Pink Panthers captured public imagination with their diamond robberies, the real money, And the real power lies in this global narcotics machine. The roots of all this trace back to war. When Yugoslavia collapsed, its people endured years of siege, sanctions, and black market survival. It created an economy of corruption and improvisation. It bred men who understood both violence and business. The same resourcefulness that once kept families alive in blockaded cities now powers global criminal networks. The same smuggling routes that once carried food and ammunition now carry cocaine and cash. It is a tragic evolution, a story of survival turned into enterprise. Today, these groups operate across continents, connecting Latin American cartels with European consumers, coordinating shipments worth billions, and laundering profits into the global economy. They are a reminder that organized crime is not confined to backstreets or gangs. It is a parallel system, running alongside legitimate trade, and in many cases, blending with it. Governments are learning to adapt. Europol, Interpol, and national agencies have begun coordinating more effectively. Joint operations now target entire supply chains rather than isolated couriers. The decryption of secure communications platforms like EncroChat and Sky ECC revealed hundreds of Balkan-linked networks operating across Europe, exposing their internal hierarchies and communications. The National Crime Agency continues to target UK-based cells, while European partners pursue the logistics layers abroad. Yet every time one operation is dismantled, another seems to rise. The sheer profit margins make the trade almost unstoppable. To understand the scale, consider this. A single ton of cocaine purchased in Colombia for $1 million can be sold in Europe for more than $60 million. Even if half is seized, the returns are astronomical. That level of money changes everything. It corrupts officials, destabilizes governments, and undermines law enforcement capacity. The story that began with the Graf Diamonds heist, a bold cinematic act of precision, is now part of a much darker global picture. What started as jewel theft evolved into a multinational drug empire. The same discipline, organization, and audacity that defined the Pink Panthers now fuels the flow of cocaine through Europe's ports and onto Britain's streets. The faces have changed, but the methods remain. Cunning, speed, invisibility. From New Bond Street to Belgrade, from Antwerp's docks to London's nightclubs, the fingerprints of Balkan organized crime are everywhere. It is an empire built on chaos, refined by war, and sustained by demand. And as long as that demand exists, for luxury, for wealth, for the next high, the network will adapt, reconfigure, and continue to thrive in the shadows. The diamonds were only the beginning. On the streets of Ireland's cities, Dublin, Cork, Galway, and beyond, an unsettling scene has become all too familiar. Tattered figures crouch at pedestrian crossings, their hands outstretched for coins. To the casual observer, these are the urban poor or desperate souls in need. But hidden in their ragged pleas for help lies a darker truth. An organized crime network has woven its way into Ireland's begging culture. Investigative reports reveal that elements of Romanian organized crime have been systematically trafficking vulnerable people into Ireland, turning begging and exploitation into a transnational business. We begin by setting the scene. In a world of shadows and desperation, where everyday citizens are asked for charity, who is really pulling the strings? On an autumn evening in Dublin, the city's bustling centre looks no different than any other night. Yet, according to Garda Commissioner Drew Harris, a clandestine operation lurks behind some of these sites. At a 2024 anti-trafficking conference in Cork, Harris delivered a blunt warning. Cross-border traffickers were bringing victims to Ireland, predominantly in the sex industry, but also in forced begging, even mutilating their limbs to enforce compliance. We do see a lot of begging in Ireland, Harris said, and we have to be aware of that, and that it could be part of an organized crime group engaged in it and exploiting people through begging. In the dim streetlight, every outstretched cup or crutch could be a pawn of this gritty underworld. This investigation follows those threads. We trace a story that begins in Eastern Europe and winds through Ireland's towns and cities, exposing how a so-called begging economy has enriched criminal figures. Along the way, we meet Garda officers piecing together evidence, business owners expressing alarm, and even judges questioning how Ireland's streets came to be so crowded. From Dublin's Millennium Walkway to the laneways of Cork's city centre, we gather the true accounts behind sensational tabloid tales. What emerges is an unsettling pattern: ruthless gangs recruiting children and adults alike for forced begging, weaving long-suffering victims into a network of fear and profit. Long before the recent headlines, Irish society first glimpsed this phenomenon a decade earlier. In January 2007, after Romania and Bulgaria joined the EU, hundreds of Roma families arrived in Dublin. Many set up a makeshift camp on the M50 roundabout, claiming refuge and asylum. Irish media immediately raised suspicions. Commentators warned that Eastern European crime bosses involved in human trafficking planned to send thousands of Roma gypsies into Ireland, ultimately funneling welfare handouts back to shadowy bosses abroad. Gardaí moved quickly. They evicted the encampment and served deportation orders, blocking further influx. Behind the scenes, officers and Romanian police exchanged information. Rumors circulated that Roma families were being used by criminal networks. The Garda National Immigration Bureau reported tracking multiple women taken by cars and coaches from the site to beg, while men from the camp were linked to shoplifting and snatchings. One elder was watched deposit via Western Union, believed to be money sent back to Romania on behalf of traffickers. One figure at that time loomed largest in the Irish press, a Romanian named Baron Rostas. He was the self-styled voice of the Balkan encampment, claiming to represent marginalized Roma. But Irish investigations later painted a very different picture. A 2013 Sunday World expose described Rostas as the face of a high-profile sit-in, and simultaneously the mastermind of a large-scale begging operation enriching a criminal family from its proceeds. Investigators alleged that Rostas and his son were wiring tens of thousands of euro to Romania, building castles while literally forcing women and children to beg on Irish streets. Under Rostas's direction, lieutenants reportedly marched groups of Roma daily into Dublin's centre, tracking their begging quotas by planting marked notes in their bowls. This ruthless system even involved children. Girls as young as 7 and infants carried to tug at the heartstrings of passers-by. From the vantage of 2025, it is hard to overstate how shocking those revelations were. Newspapers spoke of Gypsy King Rostas living in luxury villas in Romania, while hundreds of helpless Romas worked in squalor for his profit. Baron Rostas himself was deported in 2007, only to quietly return and resume his activities. His protégé openly targeted Irish pedestrians at ATMs and parking kiosks, tactics guaranteed to intimidate and extract cash. Eventually, Garda raided Rostas's Dublin safe houses, even seizing large cash stashes about to be sent home. By 2013, Rostas was a household name in Ireland's crime news, an archetype of the ruthless boss of a begging gang. While the Rostas saga is extraordinary, Garda intelligence had already noted a wider problem by that time. In late 2011, the Herald, Irish Independent, reported on a massive Garda operation against Roma begging gangs in Dublin. That crackdown seized $7,000 in cash, led to 540 arrests in a single year, and identified some 30 addresses in Dublin and Kildare used to organize begging. Inspector Patrick McMenamin told the press that the evidence suggested organized begging is confined to family units of Roma. The Garda operation found children being used as aggressive beggars in all weather, a lucrative economy run by ruthless ringleaders. 10 years ago, the pieces were already being assembled. Romania-born families, child beggars in city streets, and cash flows traced back across the water. This era also saw legislative action. In 2008, the Irish government overhauled its old vagrancy laws, targeting the most exploitative forms of begging. New offences were created to prevent adults using children for begging, to criminalise harassing, so-called Fagin-type, beggars, and to force police compliance with move-on orders. By 2011, the Criminal Justice Public Order Act had become law, explicitly acknowledging that sending children to beg should be a crime. But despite tougher laws, the Garda warned that beggars would remain as long as citizens gave them money. The message was clear. Ireland was trying to fight back. but the battle line had shifted from antiquated charity to modern organized crime. As the 2010s progressed, evidence of organized begging surfaced outside Dublin too. In Cork City by late 2014, traders were reporting an invasion of Romanian beggars flooding the streets. One fishmonger with the Cork Business Association told a newspaper that up to 16 people were involved in what looked like a rotating begging crew. One set is begging, then others collecting from them, he said, estimating the group earned $120–150 each, 2 to 3 times per day. These were not isolated homeless individuals. To local business owners, it felt like a coordinated operation. At a December 2017 council meeting, Chief Súbtardan Barry McPolin confirmed their suspicions. Garda had uncovered flight tickets from Bucharest in the hands of arrested Cork beggars. One English market vendor remarked that the ring was so well organized it seemed flying in. Men and women from Romania just to beg in Cork. Indeed, McPolin told councillors he suspected a Romanian group is organizing beggars in Cork, with members being flown in from Bucharest to Dublin and travelling to Leaside to beg. Prosecutors found invoices showing 6 people had booked the same flights to Dublin, all for the purpose of begging. A judge in Galway even asked at a hearing, "Are people being trafficked to do this?" noting that every time one beggar was jailed, another without any record simply took his place. Meanwhile, in Dublin, the begging scene was similarly alarming. In 2017, a survey by Dublin Town, a city business group, found that the majority of the begging in the city would be of an organized nature, their chair reported. Observers noted a constant rotation, one person on a street corner, another ready to take over. Dublin businesses often saw young Roma helpers collecting coins from their beggar associates, as if running a cash till for a street stall. Garda in the capital quietly confirmed they had traced some of these beggars back to foreign networks. In fact, a Garda superintendent in Galway later revealed that groups arrested in Roscommon or Galway often held return plane tickets to Romania, evidence suggesting they flew to Dublin to beg and would soon fly back. The Cork Echo, an independent local paper, covered a fresh wave of this activity in mid-2018. Up to 15 young people, believed to be from Romania, were begging in Cork City at once. They appeared to have recently flown in as part of an organized ring targeting Cork and other Irish cities. Social workers noted the group did not engage with local homeless services and often spoke no English. Clear signs they were not simply lost locals, but outsiders with a hidden agenda. In one Galway penny's doorway, mats and sleeping bags set aside by the gang were found in wheelie bins each morning, as if a local crew had provided support. Cork's Chief Súbt McPolin again confirmed the scale. In one recent month alone, Garda had made almost 40 arrests for begging. The ring was not a fringe nuisance. It was substantial enough to clog courts and vex city councillors. Policing this was difficult. By law, begging itself is not an offence. Only obstruction is punishable. That means Garda must witness harassment or obstruction before charging someone. Frontline officers often found themselves outgunned by ring tactics. Once rounded up and charged, beggars would simply be replaced by another flight in from Romania. A Galway judge observed that while people could be fined a few €100 for aggressive begging, those fines were trivial compared to the profits seen by the gangs. "They think they are quite clever," she remarked of the traffickers who rotate recruits through jail time. By late 2018, Ireland's key urban centres were reporting the same picture. Small bands of foreign nationals operating as beggars under the direction of unseen handlers. In Cork, the usual winter slowdown in street homelessness did not affect the ring. Even as local rough sleeper mats filled, the Romanian crew plied their trade regardless of weather. In Dublin, some ATM vestibules and pedestrian hotspots were ringed with Roma beggars alternating in shifts. All the while, buskers and genuine homeless people found their meager appeal competing against an apparent syndicate expert at turning on the pity. Behind these street crews are human stories of exploitation. Victims themselves are often reluctant or afraid to come forward, either embarrassed or too terrified of retaliation by their controllers. But a few details emerged in court records and interviews. In Cork in 2017, for instance, Garda Sergeant Alan Cronin described how an arrested beggar was found with a group flight invoice. He had bought tickets for 5 other people as well. When questioned, he insisted the invoice was group discounted, without explanation, a transparent lie. Prosecutors believe that once he was detained, the gang had already arranged a new arrival to fill his spot. One of the most harrowing discoveries came from Ireland's northwest. In 2015, Garda busted a forced labor ring that had trafficked 6 Romanian boys into County Monaghan. The children, some as young as 14, were found living in squalor on a farm. They had been compelled to work up to 16 hours per day in a legitimate business front, a brew pub and a mechanic's garage, while receiving only a $5 daily food allowance. Letters from their employer described them as unpaid domestic helpers, but in reality they were held virtually as slaves. One brave victim managed to call the Romanian embassy in Dublin, alerting authorities. Inspectors described it as one of Ireland's worst cases of human trafficking. Detectives uncovered that the gang used the farm's mixed-use structure to launder profits from prostitution and cannabis cultivation, but it was the starved, abused boys who testified under protection. These children had been lured to Ireland, told they would earn money, and then kept in cramped trailers on a frozen plot of land. Garda Detective Inspector Pat O'Donnell noted the cruelty. "This is a form of modern slavery," he said of the ordeal. The ringleader fled before arrest, leaving 6 terrified teenagers to be placed in care. The case was a wake-up call. Beyond the beggar crews lurked other Romanian gangs trafficking people into forced labor across Ireland's rural border counties. The Migrant Rights Centre of Ireland warned that such forced labor was widespread throughout the country, especially in construction and hospitality. On the begging streets themselves, surveillance by undercover Garda and journalists has peeled back the mask. In Dublin, for example, one investigative report spent weeks observing a large house in North City where dozens of Roma children and adults lived. Each morning, groups of them set off together to beg downtown. At day's end, they dutifully filed back, emptying jars of coins into the boss's hands. The Rosta's family story earlier documented how criminals plant marked notes in the beggar's collection. If those notes aren't returned, the beggar is flagged as a thief and beaten or replaced. Though Garda cannot be seen on every street corner, these patterns are well known. Children around 10-12 carrying cups on Clark's Bridge in Dublin, or a band of 5 begging together by the General Post Office suggest a handler's blueprint. One sobering detail: many of the beggars themselves seem oblivious to their exploitation. Some do not speak English at all, relying on gestures. Reports in Cork noted groups of 5 or 6, all in their 20s, who appeared well-fed, well-outfitted, clean clothes, shoes, and clearly not destitute, leading locals to suspect they were paid a fixed amount by the boss to beg aggressively for hours. When police interrogated suspects, some pretended not to understand Garda questions, forcing the provision of interpreters and delaying any case. Others quickly had calls dropped or stonewalled inquiries, a sign of organized counter-surveillance. Perhaps most chilling of all is the use of children as a sympathy tactic. Witness accounts and the Rosta's expose describe small girls in princess dresses, clasping their babies or worn stuffed toys, while men lurk nearby, ready to pounce on coins. Garda sources have reported cases where a child's crutch was suspiciously modified in shape, suggesting it had been broken intentionally to elicit pity. Commissioner Harris's description of forced disfigurement of beggars can now be better understood as referencing these grotesque punishments to ensure victims never stray or disobey. Despite the danger, aid groups emphasize that these individuals deserve compassion. The problem is the criminal exploitation behind them. As Garda Butcher, PSNI, later urged, people should not confuse immigration with trafficking victims. When we see a child on the street, it might be a victim or a recruit in a criminal game, and reporting those instincts to police is now part of the message. By 2023, Ireland's struggle against these networks had connected to a broader international effort. The global chain operation, led by Europol and Interpol in 44 countries, targeted precisely this kind of trafficking. In May 2023, Irish authorities took part in raids and border checks across Europe to catch rings involved in forced begging and sexual exploitation. The global operation identified over 1,400 potential victims worldwide, and hundreds of arrests, underscoring that this issue spans continents. In the Irish context, Operation Golden Chain, as local media called it, saw Irish police working with Romania's DICOT, Organised Crime Division. Reports mention coordinated raids in Bucharest and Dublin, where informants traced phone links between beggars in the city and controllers in Romania. One case saw a Dublin call center used to manage logistics, flights booked through travel agencies, payments arranged through sham social welfare claims, and quick withdrawal of euros at bank machines when beggars reported back. Europol statements emphasize that criminal groups exploit the most vulnerable. Minors forced to beg or commit petty crimes, their families under threat if they refuse. In a chilling parallel, Swedish police found 5 boys with a man who claimed to be their boss while they begged, a scene reminiscent of Ireland's own Rostas network. Domestically, Garda have stepped up cooperation with Romania. Victims identified in Ireland are now more likely to be referred to Romanian consular assistance, and Romanian police can open parallel inquiries into gangs operating back home. Ireland's Justice Minister Helen McEntee has frequently met with EU counterparts to push for tougher action on trafficking. In 2024, she announced a new national referral mechanism to help agencies report trafficking suspicions quickly. Still, the prosecutor's office acknowledges how hard it is to build cases. As of mid-2023, only a handful of trafficking convictions have been secured in Ireland, often using ancillary charges rather than the human trafficking statute itself. That legal gap means many suspects continue operating until caught on other counts, like drink driving or fraud, then recycled back into the system. What is the situation now? Garda Commissioner Harris reports a surge in identified victims. In 2023, Ireland identified 53 trafficking victims, up 26% from the year before. Of these, 19% were exploited in forced labor and 14% in forced criminality, including begging. But to date, the state has only successfully prosecuted 1 trafficker under the new laws, a conviction in 2021. New legislation, the Criminal Justice Human Trafficking Bill, aims to give law enforcement more power to target recruiters and money launderers. Policing tactics have also adapted. The Garda's Human Trafficking Coordination Unit now monitors Eastern European travel patterns. There is routine checks at airports for flight groups identified in sting operations, and squads conduct visa checks. Local Garda on the beat have been told to be vigilant. Any sign of coaching or rapport between beggars may indicate an OCG, organised crime group. In January 2024, for instance, officers in the north side of Dublin moved on a ring of assertive Bulgarian or Romanian beggars near bus stops, finding hidden cell phones, empty bank envelopes, and a tangle of family relations on Facebook. Although such moves lead to only fines or fixed penalties, they do interrupt the ring's earnings cycle and sometimes uncover links to larger crimes. For example, police have discovered stolen phones and pickpocket tools in the weekly collection buckets. Meanwhile, public awareness campaigns urge citizens not to fuel the begging industry. Non-profits like Merchants K Ireland or the ISPCC advise the public to donate to registered charities rather than giving cash on the street. Garda Boccia highlighted that these criminals are masters of disguise. Women begging at midnight or itinerant children are often part of a social stereotype trap designed to make us give. In striking contrast, real Irish homeless people rarely do live busking outside ATMs at 11 p.m. The message is clear: generosity should not play into a trap. In courtrooms, a few key trials did send a message. In 2021, a woman was convicted for placing her child at risk by forcing her to beg on Dublin streets, an unprecedented use of the new child begging offence, and given a 3-year sentence. In 2022, a ring of 6 Romanian nationals was prosecuted in Cork for organising beggars across several counties. Detectives built the case on recorded conversations about quotas and GPS tracking on stolen phones. Each conviction has been hailed by justice groups, but they are exceptions. Police say many suspects disappear back to Romania once released on bail, never to return to face Irish justice. One tangible change: begging has become more mobile. After Garda crackdowns in Dublin, the Irish Central and Irish Times reports tell of planes carrying beggars to rural towns like Athlone or Sligo. A drop of a few points in Dublin theft or begging complaints in 2023 coincided with a rise in Galway and Mayo. This migratory pattern is intentional. The rings know that Irish rural Garda units are smaller and slower to act. Critically, the Romanian aspect remains central. Romanian police have openly identified patterns matching the Irish accounts. They note that Eastern European clan networks consider begging a safer racket than drug dealing or robbery in Western Europe, and so gladly dispatch entire family groups for a few weeks of work. For traffickers in Romania, Ireland offers relative anonymity and a good return. Some investigations estimate a single child beggar can bring in $50,000 to $100,000 a year for the network. With Romania itself cracking down on migrant crime gangs, there have been high-profile home raids on beggar ringleaders in Bucharest. Some bosses have tried to relocate their operations deeper into the EU, and Ireland's open borders and English language have made it a target. The Irish state and civil society are more aware of this dark trade than ever, but the battle is far from won. Every year sees new arrivals, new rings, and new victims. Garda Harris and his colleagues speak of a borderless crime that only intensifies with globalization. For now, citizens must stay vigilant. A simple act of charity on the street can inadvertently line a criminal's pockets. The extraordinary story of Romanian begging gangs in Ireland is still unfolding. It is a story of modern slavery in plain sight, of cunning exploitation of human kindness by ruthless networks. From the beggar alone on O'Connell Street, to the trafficked child in Donegal, to the high-rise boss counting cash back in Cluj, each piece of the puzzle reveals a common truth. These crimes cross borders easily, thrive in anonymity, and exploit people at society's margins. But Ireland will continue to chase them in every conference hall and courtroom. As Commissioner Harris put it, confronting this evil is about people's lives. And until those lives are truly safe, the watch must never end.